Welcome to HIListically Speaking. I'm Hilary Russo, certified holistic health coach and health and wellness journalist. This is an empowering place to explore self-awareness, self-love, and transformation through health, healing, and humor. By sharing life-changing experiences, knowledge, and guests with varied expertise, we'll explore who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. Mind, body, and spirit. I'm glad you're here. When I released last week's podcast talking about body image, I received a lot of feedback from many of you, not only those who identify as women, but also men. So thank you for sharing. If you think body dysmorphia is gender specific, think again. Krietchman battled it for a long time. As a professional bodybuilder, numbers mattered, and he spent years keeping them in check for every competition he entered, and life in general. His self-worth was challenged on many levels, his mental health on the line, to the point where he even considered suicide. But at some point, Chris turned his life around and began living well, really well. And then COVID. A positive test threw him for yet another loop. I watched Chris's journey as he shared it publicly on social media. This virus doesn't discriminate, clearly. Now, Chris is on the other side of COVID, whatever that means, as far as we know. Battles still exist. And with all that has happened over the last 10 months, a new man with a new vision has surfaced. One that not only has Chris continuing to support others in health, but also the city he calls home. Take a listen. So, Chris, it's so great to have you on HIListically Speaking. You know, what's so interesting is the way I meet people or reconnect with people. You and I have a little bit of something in common that goes back, I don't know, about 30 years, right? Something like
Easily,
that?
Yes. Yeah. I'd say 30.
All right. So Chris and I both went to fat camp. We only found that out after we connected when you invited me to a Wellvyl event, which is your company. And I am so excited to have you here to share more about your journey and how you've went from trauma to triumph and how you're living your life powerfully.
Well, thank you. It's been an interesting ride, going from fat camp and, starting a Christmas light business at the age of 10 and, just facing some interesting journeys, to say the least. Becoming, planning to be pre-medicine, becoming a bodybuilder, a doctor. All these things were things that I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life. And, health and life has its way of showing up and saying, no. This is your road, or that's your road. And it's interesting how just a simple thing of like going to fat camp really shaped and molded my life and my psychology to be who I am and where I am today with Wellvyl and a lot of other crazy things that I'm up to these days. So it's been interesting.
It is amazing how the journey happens, and we can never really plan it. We just kind of have to let it go and see what manifests in our life. I don't know if I knew what the heck I wanted to do at 14. That's when I was there, and it was only one summer, but I know that it paved the way for a discipline. While we were there, we learned more about a relationship with food, and not everyone there was heavy. Some people were there for maintenance. Some people just wanted to lose 5 or 10 pounds. And I think we've learned so much about the health and wellness industry since going to a camp like that, which was a Weight Watchers sponsored camp back in the 1980s, I believe it was. We've learned so much about how to be mindfully in touch with health and wellness. And you've seen that on your journey, as you just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, being in an extreme version of, weight control as a professional bodybuilder, there's a lot of psychological things that come out of that. body image, body dysmorphia. A lot of things come out of that. Self-worth, value, how you appear to other people and all that sort comes out of all of this experience. And it's interesting, at the age of 10, I was sent to this experience, which then really shaped my entire life. And speaking to what you just mentioned, like on the other side of it's 30 years later, and I did 4 summers there. And it was really interesting because it didn't work in the short term. It worked in the long term. Mm-hmm. But after a lot of battles dealing with the psychology of, what fat camp meant at that time for that age, for that human being, I don't think that in that moment it's good and healthy, because we're basically learning about our self-worth through image, mm-hmm. which is not the greatest position to put adolescence in. Mm-hmm. And then, I'm luckily a founder of Wellvyl, who understood through a meal program business that I operated and owned for 4 or 5 years and fed like 650 people, daily meals. We wasn't even marketed and advertised as a weight loss company. It was marketed as a, no thinking, no shopping, no cooking, just eating. Like, you just tell us who you are, what your goals are, whether it's to maintain, gain, or lose. Like, we just sent you meals to supply for it, so you could actually remove the psychological constraints. And through this journey, I've realized how much really affected me and my health. And then not knowing that I had other health underlying issues and conditions that I found in my 20s, my 30s, and now being 40s. So it's like, oh, well, that's interesting. Wish I knew that then.
Yeah, what we didn't know then that we know now, and even now is a challenge and a struggle sometimes. I mean, there's so many people dealing with body image concerns. We are in a society, in a world now that is based on the digital age. And back when we were kids, it was magazines and TV. And now you add that extra element of social media, where there's such an increase in the amount of anxiety and stress and depression and other feelings and emotions that people are facing because we are looking at other people. We are seeing what other people are doing and
Correct.
being, and that can be very overwhelming. But you're right. We weren't given the behavioral health tools when we were at the camp. I hope it's grown since then to where it incorporates that, because understanding the relationship between not just you and food, but that you're beautiful just the way you are,
Yes, that's very big. And, to mention that to comment about what you just mentioned about the difference between when we were younger and to people today. And I say that this affects people of all ages, because today with social media, nothing is ever off.
Yeah. So,
because we're dealing now with programming, because remember, like after 11 o'clock, after 12 o'clock, there wasn't really any programming on basic TV mm-hmm. when we were kids. And, there was like a late show or something like that. Today, the world is always on, and someone's posting something all the time because it's 1 a.m. somewhere. It's 12 in the afternoon somewhere. So no matter when you plug into Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, your streaming platforms, whatever, there's always something there for you to measure yourself up against. When we had a magazine, like, that was the end of the content.
Oh, so true. Yeah. There's never an end, because we're on this 24-hour cycle. You're right. Somewhere in the world, or as we always, what's the phrase? It's happy hour somewhere, right? So
5 o'clock somewhere.
Right. So that's a big, not to be able to turn off is incredibly important, because we need downtime. And where you've gone with this, I mean, you mentioned body dysmorphia, which is something that so many women talk about. And the fact mm-hmm. that you're a man embracing that terminology because you went through it. And I'm sure it traveled with you in time from the point where you were a kid at camp to where you became this like big bodybuilder in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My entire self-worth was based upon, how how shapely my muscles were and how much my V taper was and how little body fat I had and how much muscle mass I could pack on, how much weight I can lift and push. Like it was just the muscles did the talking for me when it came to society. And realizing that I watched Pumping Iron when I was 10 years old, and I was like, I want to be like him. And I realized that it wasn't the body, it was the charisma. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that until I'm an adult, into my 30s, going into my 40s, to go, oh, wait a minute. Muscles. It wasn't the muscles, it was the personality. So, what does a guy do who grows up in a community where there's anti-Semitism and your father's Jewish and your mother's Catholic and you go to Catholic school and the priests are even saying, so you get picked on and you go, all right, well, now I'm making correlations that muscles equals charisma, muscles equals intimidation, muscles equals strength, power. So I'm going to go and dump all my energy into muscles. So it became such a psychosis for me that it became a lifestyle where I wouldn't really go out. I remember spending anywhere between 3 to 6 hours a day in the gym from the ages of 10 to 19 years of age.
Your body's still growing at that point, and the one muscle you're not paying attention to is your brain.
Yes.
The most important part.
I'm doing my studies, but I'm not, more importantly, I'm not dealing with people.
Yeah, you mentioned that when we had our last conversation, you said you were very isolated. And you were so focused on being like Arnold, meaning Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that did not help you develop those social skills, and it became quite a toxic environment for you. Yeah,
absolutely. It was very lonely, sad, and then what I realized was in the perspective of being isolated and having an isolated lifestyle, I was able to do a lot of introspection. I was able to do a lot of observation and pay attention to the world and see what's affecting me and how it's affecting others, and kind of almost look at myself from a scientific lab point of view. And all right, well, how can I improve myself this way and that way, and what can I do better? And think about what I would do if I was in a social situation, but still that fear of well, I need to be asleep and get X amount of hours of rest because all the work in the gym will be useless. And then I have to catch a meal every 2.5 hours and I've got to walk around with a gallon of water. It just became this constant circle bout with be social, have friends, or have friends that go to the gym, or just live in the gym and isolate myself to the work. Because in society, we're told, you put your head down, you do the work, and you focus and you'll succeed. But no one tells you that, hey, 60% of the job in life is the network and the social skills to meet people and develop your career and develop your lifestyle.
Yeah.
No one tells you that from the ages of 10 to 16. If you come from Guy Kawasaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if you come from a certain group of family, you're told, work hard, keep your head down, follow the rules, graduate, get job, get married, have 2.1 kids, have a dog, cat, etc., picket fence. And then here we are in 2021 now going, oh, so all that was a lie.
Right. We can read all the books there are out there, but sometimes it's we're just not, what are we missing? What's the message we're missing? And for you, everything you're talking about has led you to the work that you do now, which we'll get to in a minute, but you and I would have to say most of us have dealt with this, that disconnect with human connection, which is vital for our well-being, and spending so much time focusing on the only relationship you had was with yourself and how you looked. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about suicide in your early 20s.
Yes. So accompanying the psychological disconnect and the lack of social skills and training that I was doing, I was beating up on myself. And then I also had a entrepreneurial mindset, and I wasn't really in a community that embraced that sort of attitude. It was more stick to the program type of thing. which, you know, I also found out that I had, they had diagnosed me with a learning disability when I was in college, and they were like, oh, you know, we want you to repeat like 3.5, 4 years worth of school. They found this out when I was a senior, and I was just like, I'm pre-med. You're telling me I have this. And no, like it just gave me to a position where the straw that broke that camel's back. And I tried to, you know, on Thanksgiving Eve of 2002, I decided to overdose on some stuff called GHB. And I figured it would be the easiest way to go. And it would look like I overdosed by accident. And it would spare family and friends of the embarrassment of me committing suicide. But then, you know, I didn't account that I would, you know, survive. And, you know, then I had to explain my story. And then I also had to work and get through that and go through, you know, a decade plus of, all right, well, where is the problem? Is the problem me? Am I the cause and the root of all the disappointment? Am I causing myself my own disappointment because I'm trying to achieve this, you know, statuesque, ridiculous, always pushing the perfection model of a body when I'm living? Mm. So, you know, the combination of all those things really brought me to a lot of realizations and understanding and acceptance as well.
Yeah. Did it take you, was that kind of the turning point for you rather, or was it that 10 years, that decade of hard work? Because to be confronted with, I hate to call it a fail, but to not have a successful attempt at something you were trying to do to end the pain, where we know it's just a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right?
Correct.
How did that affect you emotionally?
Well, to be very honest, you know, the mindset was, wow, you can't even do that right. And that stuck with me for years. Yeah. You know, then I was sent to psychologists and therapists and everything, and they put me on all the medication. It, you know, tried this and tried that, and it just kind of like numbed me. And it took the spirit of who I am, of this get out there and do. It kind of like numbed me, and I was realizing that they don't have the answer. They don't know how to help me. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized I gotta see how much I can push the envelope to really remedy myself. And then on top of that, I then, you know, go into, you know, my professional career for my pro card in bodybuilding. And right after the pro card qualifying competition, I herniate discs in my back, and now I lose bodybuilding altogether. So, you know, when you sit here and you think about, well, I failed at this, you know, and you build yourself back up to being this bodybuilder because you're able to put your energy into that, because you didn't succeed at suicide. You now put yourself into bodybuilding. You get to this level that is hard to achieve. And then universe goes, no, wait, I'm going to throw one more curveball at you. You're going to herniate your discs in your back, and you're no longer going to be able to be a professional athlete for a while. And you're going to go on a 10-year journey from here to figure out what that problem is. So in the constant punches in the face, I keep moving forward. And in that realization from the ages of 22 to 40, I realized no one's got an answer besides me. And it's going to be my best guess. And I'm going to just pay attention to the signs. I'm going to pay attention to the people I meet. I'm going to pay attention to the outcomes of the activities. And I'm going to say, all right, am I going in the right direction? Because there's no, you know, bless my father, he's 75 years old. He tries to give me all the advice. And he's like, I don't have direction for you right now. I don't know what to tell you because he's a dentist. He's like, I had 4 kids at your age and 2 offices. You're the opposite of everything I've ever done. And that doesn't make you bad. He goes, I'm proud of you. And I think you're very capable of doing all the things you're doing. But even my father can't give me any advice.
Yeah.
So who are you left to? You got to start reaching out and learning and making friends with people in the community that, I have this saying that blood isn't always the blood you share, but it's also the blood you spill with in the battle of life. And, some people refer to it as chosen family. And I have a lot of colleagues that I've been out there who have become my support structure, who've actually helped me be who I am today because I wanted coaching. I wanted advisement. I wanted it. You can't improve if you're not coachable.
Yeah, even coaches need coaching. I mean, I have a coach. I have numerous coaches I go to help me in different areas of my life. We need to be coachable. You're right. But the other thing that brings me to what you mentioned is that by realizing that it's not just going to mom or dad for the advice and realizing that we are part of a community, here you are building this community with Wellvyl, which is exactly what that is. It's connecting with like-minded people and people that might have a skill in one area and you have a skill in the other, and you align with each other and you collaborate and build.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in the magnificence of, the project that we have at Wellvyl that we were doing, which was the events, it was a great source for people to come together for whatever the reasons. And whether it was for business, whether it was for friendship, it was a place that you can trust that the people in this room cared about the same things. And that was amazing. It was fantastic. Um, and obviously because of COVID, life has to change.
Yeah.
So,
How are you going forward with Wellvyl now?
so we're shifting our attention to digital as much as everyone else is. We're not necessarily going for virtual events. What we're going for is more of an educational approach. We're going to be putting a lot of work into our magazine. We're going to bring on a lot of public health doctors and other PhDs to come in and talk about how society's ills, how we get acculturated to society, all the different experiences that we go through. And they're going to talk about the science behind and the proof and evidence of how it impacts our psychology and how we treat our fellow human beings. Because at the end of the day, we could do all the self-care we want, but if we're not nice to each other, or at least kind, because kindness and nice are two different things.
Yeah.
Kindness is the ability to be nice to someone when you're having the worst day of your life, because it's not their fault. And all kindness also means that you sometimes you have to smack a person in the face so that they don't get stabbed by someone, tomorrow.
Right. I'm doing you a favor by smacking you in the face. I want to go deep on that one because you mentioned COVID, and not everyone has had the experience Chris has had with COVID, because you had COVID when this first came to be.
Yes, I did. And I got my first symptoms on the 14th of March, and which is the same anniversary date of when the first resident of New York City passed from COVID. I was unaware of how severe it was. I would not have traveled to the West Coast for my birthday weekend had I known. My nurses, my doctors, because I have 5 underlying health conditions. The primary one is CIDP. It's like Parkinson's, ALS, and I take infusion treatments of immune globin to boost my immune system. And it's a very high dosage that I'm on, like 300 grams per month to 360 grams per month. So by nature of age and my own health capacity, I should not have gotten sick. And I got sick to the point where I had the symptoms for 15 to 18 days. I was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. They had to keep me under observation because of histories of chronic pneumonia, ruptured lung, and all these things that have happened to me over the years. I think I have 9 lives or more at this point. But that's a whole other podcast that I will be doing later on in life. But to be very frank, the other thing that people don't realize about COVID is that it's not about the mortality rate alone. And the understanding of COVID is very complex. It acts like the flu. It causes pneumonia, but it also acts like HIV. Because people are like, well, how are people dying of pneumonia and the flu and this other stuff, but they're being categorized as they died from COVID. And the problem is that you have to understand the nature of this beast that we're dealing with and what else it does to people and how it affects us. So for a person like me, the second I got sick, I wasn't allowed to have my biweekly treatments, which impacts my ability to walk and not be in a wheelchair. So I had to test negative twice, 24 hours apart, to prove that I was clean and free of COVID so that I can go back on my treatments. So what did COVID do to me? It exacerbated my neuromuscular degenerative diseases. It exacerbated my intestinal problems, my stomach issues, sensory issues, taste buds, sinus. Like, it has residual impact, and it can cause havoc for a person like me who has health insurance, thanks to the love of God at this point, or the universe, whichever you want to deem is the higher entity at this point. I'm lucky to have health insurance, and my health insurance has, between copays and everything, I've almost paid double just to exist. And I've got the insurance company saying, we're not approving you for this, we're not approving you for that, because we don't realize the impact that this virus has had in the institution of healthcare and health insurance systems and people with pre-existing issues. We still don't even know how the vaccine interacts with people like me.
Yeah, it almost feels like a guinea pig.
Yeah, and I'm not open to taking the vaccine when I know that it's not officially approved by the FDA. It's been given emergency clearance. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, and I'm not saying we shouldn't take the vaccine. I'm just saying, let's see. We don't know, and that's why I'm cautious now. Both my parents have taken the vaccine. Mm-hmm. And they're a week into their vaccine, and they seem to be fine. They had some stuff here and there, but ultimately, end of the day, I went through the whole experience of being sick. And then it took 25 days for me to get out of my system. And I still have every so often a random night or day or a couple of nights where I get these crazy cough fits, and it's not anything. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I have heaviness of breathing. So at the end of the day, I support the vaccine, but patiently. I'm not in a rush. There are other people that are willing, let them start. And there are people who need it more, let them start. I am going to be a little cautious, because I know that when you rush the scientific process and the procedural processes, which are put in place in order to create a healthier outcome, you have hiccups, to say the nicest way of it.
You're very patient, Chris. Honestly, what else can you be in this moment? Because watching your journey, and you were very public about sharing it on social, like you going to your medical appointments, you coming back from the hospital, how you feel on day 6, how you feel on day 12. I mean, it was a little scary as a friend, as someone that knows you, to witness what you're going through, and knowing I have absolutely nothing that I could do, but also just knowing that you're going through something that we don't know how to deal with it 100% effectively,
And that's actually what it comes down to, is we don't know enough. We know that this thing acts like a lot of different things. And, people have this argument about, well, they're lumping everybody into this category if they died from COVID. And the reality is that COVID weakens your immune system, and it creates a possibility for you to die from pneumonia that you normally would have beaten, because it's compromising your system. And that's why we have to really respect it. It's not another flu. It's in one respect contagious and mutates like the flu, but the way it wreaks havoc on the system of your body, it's more in alignment with HIV, where it compromises you, and you can die of a lot of things that aren't necessarily related to the specifics. Yes, treatment's improved, but I ask a question, and it's rhetorical. Is wearing a mask really that much of a compromise to handle for the 1% of the population? If we live in a civilized society, what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to focus on the least common denominator, because that's the whole point of living in a civilization, is that we can raise the bar of humanity and coexist together. Now, naturally, when you have a capitalistic society, there are going to be people who are going to benefit more than others. But at the same time, you create this potential wealth gap, which we see in this country. But if you don't do anything to take care of the lesser, you're going to have problems. And here we are. We see that minority groups, public housing people, they're the ones who are getting the virus and dying. We're seeing all of these things. And it's like, well, what are we going to actually do? How are we actually going to make this better? And wear a mask. Yeah. It's a simple act. You don't want to take the mask. You want to open up businesses? Okay, well, then wear a mask.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just about ourselves. It's about others. You can think you're the healthiest person in the world, and that's great. But if you are not seeing that we're in this together, I mean, a little inconvenience can go a long way. I wonder what the change would be if more people felt like that it's not just about an inconvenience in your life and being robbed of your rights,
Well, to that rights point, people forget that your rights end or another person's rights begin.
Yeah, it's yin and yang circle,
right?
No, that's a great way of looking at it. And we have no idea. We just don't know enough. And why are we taking such risks? It it it's a little unsettling, but in my mind, I think this year has taught me a lot. You know, uh, Obviously, you've been through COVID, but what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned from your experience in this year?
The biggest lesson I've learned in this year is that where do I want to reflect upon from in a decade from now, and how I behaved this past year. Mm-hmm. That's where I have been. What I've learned is like, what am I going to do for the betterment of humankind? And am I going to look back and say I was selfish, or I operated under, the benefit of our fellow human beings, and especially my fellow New Yorkers? That's where I'm going to say that I have really polarized myself into that position, whether it's, COVID, or whether it's social rights and justice. It's all of that stuff. I'm going to be on the right side of history for health, humanity, and the ability to succeed for everyone.
So. Yeah, well, let's touch on that. You said especially New Yorkers, you are making a pretty bold move. I have to say, maybe you've learned something else from this whole experience, and you are looking to become more of a civil servant.
Yes. I think another lesson, to segue into what we've discussed and which we're pointing out. I've also learned that, when I look at what's going on in leadership and organizations and governments, I've noticed that there's reactive behavior. And I know that we live in a society based on reactiveness, but what's also underneath it is institutional money, special interest groups. I also see corruption. I see confusion. I don't see the accountability, the transparency, the efficacy. I don't see how people are being transparent. I just don't see how we're supposed to trust a system that can't even communicate and is tone deaf to our fellow small businesses, that we're telling them that they're not allowed to have dine-in restaurants experience and then not offer them any aid or support. I can't understand a lot of things. So I have decided that I am going to run for mayor, and I am officially a candidate. I'm not taking money from any special interest groups to prove that this is purely for the people, by the people. There's 30 plus candidates. You've got many people in this. And every time I watch the news, every time I pay attention to something, it's another person who's got experience in politics. It's another person who understands how to play the game. It's another person who's related to some or associated with someone in another organization. And I sit here and I say to myself, oh, so business as usual is what we're going to get. we're not going to get change. We need reformation and complete change in the NYPD. We need educated civil servants in our society. The fact that you only need to have 60 credits, generally speaking, to become an NYPD officer, I'm concerned about that moving forward from this point.
Mm-hmm.
If you want a better society and you want better leaders, you have to focus on the people and society and say, well, are they being educated? Why are people fighting the science behind COVID and the transmission and wearing masks and whether they don't work or do, and the vaccines and trust? It all comes down to how we're educated at the core base and how we look at other cultures. It would be amazing to see if we can reform the entire educational model where maybe it's 5 students to 1 teacher. And this way we could focus on teaching our kids from the ages of 5 to 10 humanities, communication, sociology, psychology, and different cultures to really understand the anthropological impact that we have as living in a society of like New York City, which is the capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be honest. If New York City can't get itself out of the situation that I see, which is a corrupt, not progressive giant mall where the real estate controls this country. That's this city, rather. We clearly can see that we didn't have a lockdown in New York City when people were dying by the thousands in New York City, but we did have a lockdown when there was some rioting and looting during 1 week period.
Yeah.
So we know what's important here based in this city, and how do we change it? And how we change that is, you know what? You need a disruption. The tried and true way can't always be the way. We have to change, and we need better people. And I'm running because hopefully I'll inspire other people who are not likely people to jump in and do this. Instead of having, someone who comes from the banking industry to come in and run our city, or a former NYPD officer to come and run our city. Yes, we need to handle, things like safety and crime, but at what cost is my question always. At what cost do we need to do this? Because the safer we make this city, according to what, and those were air quotes on safer, the perspective of New York City, and the more police we see and the more cameras we see, and then the speed traps and the red light tickets and all this stuff, it becomes exponentially unmanageable to exist here because it drives costs up. And then that pushes out our creative communities, which we need to hold on to. That's what gives us our character, the creative in the restaurant, the creative in the arts, the creative in the music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who in the music industry comes from New York these days?
Yeah, we are a melting pot of everything. Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we want to get New York back open and back on track, we've got to start looking at new approaches. We need a emotional and economic reform, and you can't do the economic reform without a emotional reform in the city, because we need to bring transparency, accountability, and trust. We need to actually talk to the people in the city. I want to know, will our mayor travel throughout the 5 boroughs and get to know as many people as possible on an almost daily basis? I believe that commitment has to happen to listen to people. And we need to start with a system where we educate our population. We create the right marketing plan to understand that New York can be kind and great. Because if we don't start there, any of the reform that we do won't work. So it's got to start with dealing with our psychology, and we have to heal. We've had a very interesting past 6 years in this country and in this city in particularly.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with that level of reform, understanding culture, education, and then from there we can do a lot. But we have to acknowledge the problems.
Absolutely. And these are problems that sometimes we've been kind of putting under the rug, right? And those problems never get handled when we don't confront them, So I think the one big question I have is if I was voting in New York would be, when I look at Chris and I look at the other candidates and I know what you've been through physically and emotionally, how would your health be impacted running for an office that really takes a lot of energy and actually holding office if you were to get
Mhm.
mayor.
Well, the way I see it is I haven't been able to answer a challenge that I haven't been handed. And here's what separates me from the other candidates. I understand New Yorkers. I am a New Yorker. I'm a third generation New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Staten Island. I went to college in the Bronx at Manhattan College. I live in Manhattan. Like, I walk the streets randomly and I get to know by observation and listening. And I've dealt with COVID. I've also been an entrepreneur and provided jobs in this city and struggled. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not even a millionaire. I'm none of that such. But I am a person who is always moving forward and always trying to find the answer. And I don't believe I have all the answers, but I know that I'll bring the right people together who have the right answers, who will be able to help us manage and mitigate and improve upon what we have instead of gentrifying. Why aren't we building with communities? Why aren't we doing things in a different approach instead of acting like we have all the answers? So what's different about me and what I have to say is very simple. I'm just like everyone else on the street. I'm not the most likely candidate, but that's what actually should make me the most likely candidate.
If we always do what we always did, we always get what we always got, right?
Absolutely. In order to have what you've never had before, you must do what you've never done before.
Oh, wait, are we just going to toss back a bunch of these things? I love it. I love it, Chris. That's so great. All right.
I want you to hear one thing though. If anything, we need empathetic, kind leadership. And I'm not so sure I see that.
Great.
I see a lot of people who think they have all the answers, but I'm not sure I see a bunch of people who are willing to admit that they might not have all the answers and they need other people. Or maybe even recognizing that someone else has a really good plan. It's enough of this red versus blue thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what's best for New York.
Yeah, I would love to get away from us with the party line crap, because that's really been the way things have been the last 4 years or more. I mean, I remember the days where you can have a conversation with someone who is of a different party, and it's okay, and you might not agree on things, but you go about your way and you don't take that back into the relationship. And that's what's happened, is it's become part of the relationships that have cause the demise of relationships. And then it's like the Hatfields versus the McCoys, black versus white, blue versus red. Enough, people. We need to get along.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Nothing comes from ignoring each other and polarizing to the sides, but that's what was engineered in this country over the past 5 years,
Yeah.
where we've gotten here. But now the trick is like President-elect Joe Biden says, it's time to heal.
Mhm.
Heal isn't a statement. Healing isn't a 5-minute experience. It's going to take a couple of years for us to heal from what we've just gone through, especially here in New York.
Yeah. He's going to spend the next 4 years healing what has been damaged. How much do you get
Mhm.
done? And we'll see. All we can do is let go and Godspeed.
Right?
Right? Whatever you believe in, and from one pizza bagel to another, because you and I are both from that
Yes.
interfaith home, which I love. We just have to have faith and trust, whatever that means to each individual that's listening, right? All right, so let's
Absolutely.
have a little fun, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so I love doing a little rapid fire with my guests as we come to a close, and basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at you. It's so funny. Oh my gosh, listeners, I wish you could have seen that. He's like, cracking his back and all that, getting ready for this. That's right. You're going in. I'm going to throw out a word. And what I want you to do is, without much thinking, just come back with the first word that comes to mind. Here we go. Wellness,
Self-care,
entrepreneur,
conscious capitalism,
suicide,
empathy, sympathy, compassion,
body,
love,
connection,
family, love,
duty,
obligation, responsibility.
and kindness.
What makes the world go round?
Yeah. You said kindness a number of times during our chat. So how could I not throw that in there? Because without kindness, where are we?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a beautiful part about some of the things that are written in our history books when we think about better days, which I objectively believe that we're in the best we've ever been in right now in human civilization, and we're getting better, even though it feels terrible. It's because we can see everything now. You can see the entire planet from your phone. And that's why it feels like it's worse. But the reality is it's actually improving because now we can all see what's going on and we could be ready and prepared. But human decency, communication, and respect is things that we need to hold on to. The polite good morning, good afternoon, good evening, have a good night, goodbye. Those are things that we need to get back into our practice every day because our technology is going to be more efficient. Everything is going to become more efficient. We're going to get close to that singularity approach with AI and all that sort of stuff. And the only thing that's going to keep us human is ourselves. No technology is going to keep us human. Us remembering to treat each other with kindness is what's going to separate us into the future of what we could have. And I don't believe in a dystopian future. I believe in a closer to utopian type of future, but I don't believe in utopia. I don't think that that's ever really attainable. But I think that, through kindness, everything can happen. Negotiations and agreements. So kindness is important.
Well, we're a global village, first of all. And, being kind to ourselves means being kind to others. So I appreciate you being kind and sharing your space on Holistically Speaking. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being you and sharing you with listeners and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
If you want to learn more about Chris, Wellvyl, or find out how you can support him on his crusade in the city, check out his website. You'll find that link on the podcast page. And if this podcast inspires you in any way, consider subscribing and even leaving a rating and a review. Your thoughts matter to me. We all have a story. And if you have an inspiring one to share or want to learn more about how I can support you on your healing journey from trauma to triumph, connect with me on my website at hilaryrusso.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Hilary Russo. I'd love to hear from you. Holistically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Lipbone Redding. Connection is everything, my friend, and aligning with you is why I am here. So thanks for listening. And until next time, be kind to your mind and don't forget to laugh.